Hello everyone, I'm Ken, also known as Tim's brother. Just thought I'd give you a little bio of how I've come to know how to do this body repair on our little Triumph. It's probably all started back when I was almost 15 and a half, and Dad gave me a 1960 Saab, and I'm here to say that that car was a crying shame. And it was rusty, and I worked on it from about the time I was 15 and a half, and I think we painted it just before I turned 16. And I'm here to tell you, even though we painted it in a Richard Petty knockoff blue, in the sense that we threw a bunch of colors together, it was too dark. We threw some white in it, and anyway, we come up with a powder blue, and it was it was my car. It might as well have been a Ferrari, even though it was a three-cylinder, two-cycle. Had to throw a half a quart of oil in the gas tank for every 5 gallons, and but I drove it everywhere I could. And after a short period of time, it turned out to be a little more rusty than what we could stand. And somehow we ended up with a Chrysler Corvair. I don't remember how it was, but Dad discovered it somewhere. It's a 66 Corvair convertible and smashed hard in the back. And we took a 65 rear clip, and him and I, as much as I could do, we cut that car in half and welded it all back together. And Dad and his brother had a little body shop that they were playing with at that time, and I just thought that was the greatest thing. So I actually started out doing mechanical work, but I enjoyed body work and had a knack for it, and kind of continued that. And in reality, I've really never had another job other than working in the auto repair industry. I was a body man from 17. I think I started part time in a little body shop up until my late 30s. And I was finding that even with all of my tricks and skills and knowledge, that these young guys coming in with their youthful enthusiasm and good backs, it was getting harder and harder to catch up. So I set a goal to become an office person. By the time I hit 40, I made it at 39, and stayed in the office pretty much from there on out. Service writer, body shop manager, and finished my career as the IT person, the only person in a multi body shop corporation. We had 15 locations and 3 corporate offices, and I traveled around and took care of all the IT work. So even though I wasn't fixing cars, I was still fixing stuff, and I was happy. So with all of this going on and the knowledge that I've had, I've tried to make these little videos somewhat instructive. I got into the body work just at the time that lead was being phased out and the Bondo was coming in. And of course, at that time, Bondo was all asbestos. Nobody knew it at the time. Asbestos was the miracle material. They put it in everything. And I'm sure a lot of the old body men that we thought just drank themselves and smoked themselves to death probably had a bit of asbestos problem to go with it. But I was able to survive all that. I was, most of my career, I was a combination. It's basically the car came in, wrecked. I did body work, I did the mechanical work as necessary, pulled the motors when necessary, all the suspension, and painted the car, buffed the car, and most of the time ended up washing it at the early part. Years later, once clear coats became the norm, it was really hard to do both body work and paint work because everything had to go in the paint booth. And so I was predominantly body repair, although when the painter would go on vacation, I would be the substitute painter and fill in for that. So I can't complain. Wrecked cars have gotten me everything I've ever wanted, and I just enjoy doing it. This Triumph project that Tim and I are doing, we did his, and he enjoyed doing that, obviously, being his, and he asked if we'd want to do another one just because he enjoyed the process. And I said, sure. I mean, I still enjoy doing it. It's a lot less frustrating now that I don't have to do it to make a living, but it's still fun. So that's just a little bio. I try to pass on some tips and tricks that I've learned. Like I said, the collision repair industry now is a lot different than what it was back in the days when I started, but these old Triumphs are the cars that we worked on back then. So the techniques are still relevant. And anything I can pass along, I'm glad to do it. So here's the rest of the videos for the trunk floor. We'll see how far I get along. Thanks. Hello everyone. Welcome to part 3 of the trunk floor replacement. I've been prepping the car shell to accept the trunk floor, and I've tried to set it up so that my plug welds will be on the outside of the panel. That way it will be less visible and less grinding, and it all has to be seam sealed anyway, so it should show up nicely. This is the new panel. This one side here, the stamping has put those ripples in it. This side looks good. And while I probably wouldn't have to fix it, it just bothers me. And so I thought it'd give me a chance to see what this English wheel will do. Now this is an ultra inexpensive wheel from Harbor Freight with very narrow wheels, and this was a pretty big panel. It was kind of awkward to hold it up and not bend it over that little wheel, but I'll give it a try and see what it does. So I went at this for a while, and it did take some of it out, but it didn't take it out as what I'd hoped for, and it was getting kind of hard to hang on to that thing. So after wheeling it for a while, decided to take it out, take a look at it, and it is better. In fact, it really didn't do bad, but it's still not as good as this side. And I have to admit, my English wheel skills are very new. I haven't really messed with one, so old school car will go old school. Shrinking metal with a torch is something that I have quite a bit of experience with. So we'll see how it responds. The whole thing with shrinking is that when you heat it, it needs to come up. If it sinks, you can't do it from that side. If you have the ability, you can flip the panel over, but if you can't get to the other side, you're going to have to work it some more till it comes up. My technique is to heat a small area. I used to heat really large areas back in my younger days. But the actual spot that turns blue is one of these big around as a thumbnail, maybe smaller. And when you heat it up, it raises. And when I tap it, I tap around the outside and work my way into the middle. and that kind of squishes that metal into itself, into the softer red part, and that does the shrinking. Of course, a splash of cold water and finishes it up. And as I said, when you shrink, it has to come up. So now what was a depression on the other side is raised on this side. So we'll see what we can do with it. And come out good enough. Here I'm very scientifically putting little dots where I want my plug welds. Judging by the evidence left on the old panel, this is about how many they had in it, which is quite a few. But it does hold the weight of the spare tire. So lots of holes it is. Start out with an 1/8 inch drill. Get all the pilot holes done. And I'll come back with a step drill and drill them out to a 1/4 inch. Now we've got the step drill, put them out to a 1/4 inch. Normally I like a slightly larger than a 1/4 inch hole. I don't like 5/16, but I like 1/64 larger than the 1/4. If you're not real careful when you plug weld them, it'll fill the hole in the one panel before it really penetrates the next one. But in this case, since there were so many, I wanted to do the 1/4 inch. Now here's what I'm trying to show is you see these little burrs that the drill has left, whether it's a step drill or a normal drill. When MIG welding the holes up, you have to remove that. If you don't, it just really messes up the weld. I don't really know why. You would think that even if you hammered them, dollied them down flat, that it would be fine, but it does make a big difference. So I've ground down all of the burrs. Now I'm grinding the edges. One end I'll be able to spot weld, the other end I'll be plug welding. And of course the sides will be plug weld. Putting some weld through primer on. Getting everything prepped up. The spot welding, you need to have basically all 4 sides need to be clean metal. If it doesn't make good contact all the way through, it'll just blow a hole in it. Now here, if you look closely, this is the side I was working those ripples out of. I think I got them. Looks good. Prep work is done. Time to try to fit this thing in. At this point, I'm still not 100% sure I can slip the rear end underneath the rear valance. It looked like I would go, but I knew it was going to be tight. It was tight, but I was able to pry the lower valance away and give me just enough room to slip that thing in. So that went good. I'm not sure what I would have done if it hadn't been able to get that thing in there, because I certainly didn't want to have to cut either the floor or the rear valance. It's in there. Could have used an extra hand, I think, trying to wiggle this thing in. But I got it. Get one side in, other side pops out. But by this point, I'm pretty certain I'm going to get it. Just not sure how long it's going to take. I eventually found enough screwdrivers to jam in all the right places. Got to just slip over all the lips. Now here are what I use to screw the two pieces together. It is a sheet metal screw. It's a screw with a drill bit and a very deep head. It fits very firmly onto the Phillips head and actually holds itself on even if you don't have a magnet. When I use those, I always screw into the plug well hole. I've found that when you're pushing through the metals, the two metals, that it goes through the one layer and then it pushes the other layer away before the drill drills through to draw it up, and this always changes the angle, and it also doesn't give you any wiggle room if you do want to make a change. So by using the plug weld holes to put in my little screws, it gives them some wiggle. They center themselves up naturally, and I'm going to weld the hole up anyway, so I don't have an extra hole to weld. And this is the end of the day's work. I've got it in there, got a couple screws holding it in place. I'll put in lots more. I left that corner piece out that I had made. Let me put in one clamp in there. Hold things together. We'll be ready for part 4. Once again, thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next installment.